Hello everyone, watching today's second video. So we're in JMA Friday. You can find that video here on the homepage. Just scroll down the page a little bit and it's Bob Stodesk. It's covering the next month. It takes into the start of February. A little bit of uncertainty in the more extended time frame, sort of weeks 3 and 4, but certainly the first couple of weeks, the hints are there that there could be quite a bit of cold weather. And that's what today's second video update is going to be picking up on. So we've got colder weather coming up next week. And in fact, for a time it might get really quite cold indeed as we go deeper into next week. And the very latest run of the GFS 6 o'clock run is actually hinting at a bit of a snow event across some parts of the country as we get through into middle of next week. So I'll talk you through that in a second. There's a lot of uncertainty with that, but certainly I think there will be some wintry weather coming up next week. So we'll begin though by having a look at the latest developments in the stratosphere. So I've been talking about this all week. These are the temperatures in the stratosphere at 30 HPA over the North Pole right now, and we're very, very substantially colder than average. Look at this, a black line is going down very close to around sort of minus 90 Celsius at 30 HPA. That's one of the top levels of the atmosphere in the stratosphere. The grey line here is the trend for this time of the year. So you can see just how far underneath the trend for the time of year we are. I mean, it is a cold time of year in terms of the temperatures in the stratosphere over the North Pole right now. Virtually just past perhaps the actual coldest point of the year, which typically occurs at the end of December, but only very slightly past it. So it is a very cold time of the year, but we are way under where you'd expect to be in terms of those stratospheric temperatures. The interesting thing about this winter is that there has been a disconnection all the way along, really, between what's happening in the stratosphere, where it's tending to be quite cold, and what's been going on in the troposphere, where with this very cold stratosphere, you expect to see very strong westerlies and really mild conditions for sort of America and Europe, with a strong polar vortex with these cold stratospheric temperatures. There's been a bit of a disconnection all the way along between the very cold stratosphere and the what's been happening in the troposphere. So that's one of the interesting and quite unique things about this winter. But nevertheless, got a really cold stratosphere at the moment at 30 HPA. Let's have a look at 10 HPA, which is going a bit further up. And it's the same sort of story, really, not as below the grey line as we are at 10 to 30 HPA. At 10 HPA, but nevertheless it is significantly colder than average still, whichever sort of level of the stratosphere we look at, be it 10 or 30 HPA. Now, I've been talking all week about the chance of a sudden stratospheric warming coming up through the final week of January. GFS is still going for this. So this is the later run of the GFS model, taking us towards the end of January. Starting on the 20th of January here. It all begins, and it is now up to 192 hours where this is beginning, with these warmer than average temperatures, albeit not particularly significantly so, but they are slightly warmer than average here across Europe, particularly southern Europe, as we go through into the 20th of January with those green and yellow colours. By the way, the blue and purple colours are where I've got those very cold temperatures in the stratosphere at 10 HPA. So we run through, and again we get to the 22nd on to 23rd and 24th of January. A very significant stratospheric warming is taking place. It's not a sudden stratospheric warming at this point, but a very significant warming is taking place in the stratosphere at 10 HPA through Europe and into Russia. So across Eurasia, those temperatures are beginning to shoot up. We move through to 25th, and a very substantial warming now is taking place. The red colours are beginning to appear across Siberia, and those red colours intensify. So as we run into the end of run, which takes us to 28th of January, very big warming event is taking place in the stratosphere at 10 HPA with those red and orange colours. That's a really substantial warming event that's going on. I think that probably does reach the threshold of a sudden stratospheric warming. And it is starting to, as well, starting to push in towards the pole. It's beginning to penetrate from Siberia in towards the North Pole. So these blue and purple colours are beginning to get pushed out towards Greenland and Canada. So GFS is still going for this very significant stratospheric warming event to take place in the final week of January. And we may be starting to see a few signs now that the ECMWF is beginning to pick up on this as well. As far as we can go with the ECMWF stratospheric forecast charts, is up to the 21st of January, 10 days away. And you can see this from the University of Berlin website. I've been showing you these charts all week. You can see this orange, these orange colours just here beginning to intensify across Europe and also starting to push up in towards Russia. This is Russia just here. This is Europe around here. Scandinavia is kind of there. And by the way, the actual North Pole itself is where that black X is. Just there. So at least at day 10, I think the ECMWF is now beginning to pick up on quite a substantial Eurasian warming. Whether this carries on and intensifies as the GFS wants to do as we go through the final week of January, that is more uncertain, of course, because it's out of the time frame of the ECMWF model. But certainly on the 21st, I should say, of January, it looks very similar to what the GFS is showing. So this is the GFS on the 21st of January. We've got this warming across much of Europe and also starting to push up towards Eurasia. That's where that's how the ECMWF looks on the 21st of January. They both look very similar. So we can't say that if we went further on with the ECM that it would develop this as the GFS is doing. But they do look similar, at least to the 21st of January. We'll know more over the weekend as these more critical days start to come into the time frame of the ECMWF, which is around the 24th, 25th of January. That's when the proper stratospheric warming gets going. So we'll know more in around 2 or 3 days. But up to the 21st of January, anyway, it looks like the ECMWF is trending at least in the same direction as the GFS. So I think the chances of getting this sudden stratospheric warming through the final week of January are probably increasing. But even without that, it looks like we've got some pretty extensive northern blocking coming up. Remember, the idea with the southern stratospheric warming is that you warm the temperature in the pole, in the stratosphere, and that bubble of warmth then propagates down into the troposphere, where it can set up a blocking area of high pressure. That's the theory behind the stratospheric warming. But even without that, it looks like we've got quite a bit of high pressure coming up over the Arctic. So this is the Arctic Oscillation observed and forecast chart. The black line here tells where we've been with the Arctic Oscillation. The red lines at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go. Remember, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere, not driving anything, it just tells us what the atmosphere is doing. So we've got the Arctic Oscillation going really quite positive in the next week. So that takes us up to around there, up to the middle of January. You're going to have a positive Arctic Oscillation, going to strengthen westerlies, albeit they're going to be quite cold westerlies. They're going to be bringing cold air in from Greenland and Canada, and usually cold air actually from Greenland and Canada during the course of next week. But at that point, the Arctic Oscillation is going to be positive. That probably is in association with that very cold stratosphere that we've got at the moment, a response, if you like, to the very cold stratosphere. But look how the black line's generally been quite negative, actually, through January. So generally we've had a negative Arctic Oscillation at the same time as we've had that very cold stratosphere, which is really quite unusual, the disconnect between the troposphere, which is what we're looking at just here, essentially, with high pressure and blocking, and then the very cold temperatures in the stratosphere. That's quite unusual to get that disconnect. But anyway, we are going to be going positive with the AO in the next week. But then you'll notice most of the GFS ensembles are really collapsing, actually. They are going into very, very negative territory indeed, some of these, indicating really extensive high pressure and northern blocking is likely to be forming over the pole in the sort of extended time frame of the GFS. And that is without the southern stratospheric warming, because although that stratospheric warming might be taking place while some of these ensemble members are going very negative with the Arctic Oscillation, that would be too quickly for a response, if you see what I mean, to that stratospheric warming, because there's always a time delay between getting the warming in the stratosphere and getting the high pressure down into the troposphere. And sometimes you don't get the high pressure into the troposphere. You don't get a tropospheric response to a stratospheric warming. So anyway, without the stratospheric warming, it looks like the Arctic oscillation is going to be going really quite negative after the middle part of January. And this tells us we're going to be at an increasing risk of pushing some really quite cold air out of the pole and down into the mid-latitudes. So these are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles next couple of weeks. We're looking at Aberdeen today, up in the north of Scotland, northeast of Scotland. Red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average. So a little bit above average through the rest of this week and into the weekend. From Monday, that's when the cold air starts to get through. And then we're staying cold with the upper air temperatures pretty much towards the end of the ensemble. We do have a lot of scatter by the time we get through to the end of the ensemble, as we always do. But overall, that's a pretty cold looking ensemble, and especially from this point just here, which is kind of like 15th, 16th of January through to around the 24th or the 25th. That looks like a substantially colder than average period, with the risk of some wintry weather as well. So you have got precipitation spikes. That one is associated with the drop in the temperature on Monday. That'll be a band of heavy rain. And then after that, we've got these precipitation spikes during this colder period. So undoubtedly, some of those precipitation spikes would be producing snow. This is how the surface temperatures are looking for Aberdeen. So again, we'll just scroll down and I'll show you that. We're starting off, this is 5 degrees just here, this is 10 degrees there, that's freezing just there. We're starting off above 5 degrees, so that's relatively mild for Aberdeen. This when the change takes place, of course, quite clearly a drop taking place from above 5 degrees to barely above freezing around Monday and Tuesday. And then we keep it cold really throughout. We're flatlining there somewhere between freezing and sort of 3 degrees. Maybe a slight lift up late on, but essentially that does look really quite a pronounced cold period coming up from the start of next week. Do bear in mind this is for Aberdeen, so it probably isn't all that reflected for the south of the country. In terms of the air pressure, starting off relatively high with pressure, going low early next week as that cold front brings the rain, lowers the temperatures. And then after that, generally staying quite low with the pressure. There is a gradual lift up through the course of next week, but overall it's a very weak sort of lift up, and I think generally staying quite low with the pressure next week. Temperature anomalies look like that from the 12th, 20th of January, coming out a little bit colder than average for the UK and Ireland. Precipitation anomalies looking like that, generally coming out on the drier than average side. Although you'll know it is wet, notice it is wetter, or it is above average with the precipitation around these western regions. That is where heavy showers and precipitation being dragged in on cold west to northwesterly winds. So a lot of this precipitation that we're seeing across Ireland, western Scotland, northwest England, parts of West Wales and southwest England, a lot of that is going to be wintry. And for northern areas, that means significant snow exposed to those westerly winds. Right, so this is how the GFS is looking for Monday. This is a changeover day, essentially. So we get rid of this quiet and gloomy weather that we've had all week. That's going to continue for the rest of the weekend. But by Monday, be on its way out as an active cold front pushes heavy rain southwards and eastwards. And then behind that, we've spoken about this a lot in the videos this week, wind turns into the northwest. The air will be coming out of Greenland and Canada, unusually cold air up there, moving across the Atlantic, bringing that push of cold air across the Atlantic and into the UK. So by Tuesday, we're firmly into that northwesterly wind. The air is originating from here. As I say, it's unusually cold for the time of year around Greenland and Canada, and it will be unusually cold air that's coming across the Atlantic into the UK. So that wind, you see the ice bars are tightly back, that wind have a real bite to it, even for southern parts of the country. Bite back to it's a westerly wind, bite back to it's an Atlantic wind. It will be really quite bitter, I think, particularly for the north early next week. Quite an unusual situation, and there will be heavy snow showers being pushed into the north and to the west as well. Now, this is interesting. This is just something that's showing up on this latest run of the GFS, the 6 o'clock run. It will probably be removed by the midday run. But we see this little disturbance along the jet stream forming here on Wednesday, pushing in towards the UK within that cold air. I can show you the upper air temperatures. You can see that the -5 isotherm is through the country, so we are firmly within cold air. This is where the disturbance is along the jet stream. Just there, and as we push through into Wednesday itself, it takes us to 6 o'clock in the evening on Wednesday. That disturbance has formed an area of low pressure, and that's pushing into that cold air. So that's bringing precipitation in from the Atlantic, but that's moving into cold air across the country. And so we've got a snow event going on here on Wednesday. We've got rain down in the southwest being signalled with these yellow colours there with the upper air temperatures. But anywhere to the north and the east of that is at risk of getting heavy snow during the course of Wednesday. That's particularly through parts of Wales and Midlands and eastern England. Now, do bear in mind the GFS will probably remove this area of low pressure on its latest run, because it's only just turned up for this 6 o'clock run of the GFS. But that's a proper snow event anyway across much of England and Wales on Wednesday. By midnight Thursday, that low pressure is starting to move out into the southern North Sea, and then it's clearing up, but it's still within very cold air. There's the upper air temperatures for midnight on Thursday. We see about -5 isotherm pushing southwards. Then we're back off and running into that cold and showery northwesterly wind for Thursday itself. That'll bring lots of wintry showers again into the northwest, and that continues into Friday as well. It's going to be a cold week next week. Weekend forecast tomorrow will be reflective of that. And we go through into the weekend of the 20th, 21st of January, and if anything, winds are starting to turn north. We begin to build pressure through the Atlantic as we run up towards day 10. So we go from that northwesterly into a north, possibly slightly northeasterly, with this cold air coming down across the country still. Notice many parts of Europe are now plunged into the freezer, where it's been very mild through this winter across much of central, eastern, even southeastern Europe. Now you are firmly locked into the grip of winter, with this trough of low pressure sinking down in towards the Adriatic and into Italy. That's how we finish up on day 10, looking very cold across much of Europe. The UK is cold as well, starting to build a ridge in from off the Atlantic, also raising heights over Scandinavia as well, you'll notice. And there's the upper air temperatures by day 10, which is Monday the 22nd of January. It looks very cold for much of Europe. We've got the -10, -15 Celsius isotherms through most parts of Europe here. British Isles is also looking very cold as well. We would only have to turn the wind slightly towards the east, just have to build this pressure over Scandinavia a little bit more and turn winds into the east, and we would start to drag in this really extensive cold pool of upper air temperatures that are sitting on the other side of the North Sea. So that could actually be indicating the start of a big freeze by this point. Whether that actually verifies, have to wait and see, but it certainly isn't a million miles away from turning into just a bog standard sort of UK cold interlude or cold snap into something really quite significantly cold and snowy there. So it does need keeping a close eye on. This is how the SSW is looking. So wet and windy for Monday, into those cold and showery northwesterly winds on Tuesday. This is Wednesday. There is some sort of disturbance within the isobars there. Nowhere near as much as the GFS is making of it. But I think there is some sort of trough being picked up by the ECMWF close to the country on Wednesday that might enhance the shower risk. That's how things look on Thursday. Still in those cold and showery northwesterly winds. And then up to the weekend and up towards day 10, that trough sinks down over the country. It's within cold air, so that probably brings the snow risk further southwards over the weekend of the 20th, 21st of January. By day 10, that's how we're looking. So we're raising heights to the northwest. We've got this trough across central northern Europe. In between, we've got these bitterly cold north or northeasterly winds feeding down across the country. There's the upper air temperatures. They aren't as cold at day 10 with the ECMWF, as we see with the GFS. That's the GFS upper air temperatures for day 10. That's the ECM upper air temperatures for day 10. Not as cold, but we would still be pretty bitter, I think, even if many central parts of Europe aren't as cold at that point as the GFS is indicating. So it does look really quite a wintry week next week. Now, whether that more persistent area of snow comes off on Wednesday, I think there's a lot of certainty about that, because the GFS is only just trying to pick up on that. But in without that, it does look like quite a cold and wintry week coming up through the course of next week, particularly, but perhaps not exclusively, for northern and western parts of the country. And then whether this is just a cold few days, or whether this is going to extend into a prolonged cold spell and possibly get quite severe the second half of January, I think that is open to a lot of question, and we'll know more about the longevity and severity of these cold conditions by the time we get through to next week. And as far as stratospheric warming is concerned, that still is on course, and in fact it looks as though the ECMWF is possibly, if anything, starting to get on board with that idea as well. Right, that's all for now. Don't forget to check out JMA Friday if you haven't yet done so. Tomorrow we've got weekend broadcast coming up. And then on Sunday we have the Gaz Weather, the Sunny Roundup. And also on Sunday, got a little sort of video just with a little bit about the summer. Can you believe that'll be with you on Sunday morning. So a lot going on at the website this weekend. Keep checking that for more. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.